Make sure I don't have two mics on. Okay, so for our final speaker today, I'd like to introduce Dr. Felicity Braithwaite. She's an early career, so let me just try that again. Is an early career postdoctoral fellow with the prestigious Body and Mind Research Group, University of South Australia. She is passionate about using rigorous methodology to enhance the quality of clinical research and ultimately the evidence base for pain treatments. Her Ph.D. work on improving blinding and clinical trials for complex pain treatments has been highly influential in the pain field. She is currently lead coordinator of a multi-site clinical trial investigating education and exercise treatments for knee osteoarthritis. So please welcome Dr. Braithwaite.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for having me here today. It's just such an honour to be here. I presented at the San Diego Pain Summit back in 2020 when it was the virtual version, and I could just feel the good vibes through my avatar. And it's so nice to be here in person and experience the good vibes in real life. And I've already learnt so much from all of you. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. And thanks to Rajam, of course, for setting this all up and for the invitation. So today I'm going to be talking about some of our recent work over the last couple of years where we've been working with osteoarthritis consumers as co-researchers. So what I mean by consumer is just people with lived experience of osteoarthritis and working with them alongside us as a part of the research team. So with our co-researchers, we've been co-designing translational research solutions, which essentially just means asking them what they think are good solutions to osteoarthritis management out there in the world. And that has led us to developing some educational resources that aim to bust osteoarthritis myths. So I'm going to be sharing some of those resources with you guys today, and I'd love to have your thoughts and feedback on some of those. I just want to quickly acknowledge before I get into it all of my wonderful collaborators, especially the amazing Associate Professor Tasha Stanton, who is here today. I will be dropping her name many times for street cred. And also, all the names in pink on this slide are our wonderful co-researcher team. I just thought I'd quickly introduce myself. So I'm all the way from Adelaide in South Australia. So this is our city pictured here, our beautiful city Adelaide, and we work at the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, which is this interesting building down the bottom here. It's affectionately known as the cheese grater. And I work as part of the persistent pain research group within there, which is led by Tash. But over my research career, I've also been associated with the Body and Mind Research Group, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, which has been just an honour to be part of. So I just wanted to start by setting the scene and kind of describing the problem that we're trying to tackle in osteoarthritis. So all of the biggest and best clinical guidelines are pretty consistent in their recommendation of education, exercise and weight management as first-line best practice management for osteoarthritis. So they basically say that everyone with osteoarthritis should try these things before going down the surgical route, no matter how severe their osteoarthritis is. And yet, what actually goes on in the real world is quite different to what's recommended. This is Australian data. So over half of people with osteoarthritis have never attempted exercise therapy. Only 13% are active enough to maintain their health, and that's based on the physical activity guidelines of 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous activity. 38% have never attempted to lose weight despite being overweight, and 75% are referred directly to surgeons, while only 5% are referred for exercise therapy. So it's not just people with osteoarthritis who aren't engaging with these strategies, they're not actually being advised or prescribed these things either. And I had a bit of a look at some data on this side of the world, and we see a bit of a similar story. So only 40 to 65% are prescribed best practice management anywhere in their clinical journey. Only 10% are prescribed physical therapy when they're diagnosed, and 40% of people with OA scheduled for knee replacement have never received best practice management. So this is what I see as one of the biggest problems at the moment in osteoarthritis management. We have this really poor uptake of best practice non-surgical management. And what I've also noticed in the literature is there's a real lack of genuine consumer involvement in research. So perhaps this is part of the problem here. We haven't actually asked people with lived experience what the key barriers to these sorts of management strategies are and what they think potential solutions could be as well. So I was fortunate enough to be funded by the Hospital Research Foundation to conduct my own little line of osteoarthritis research over the last 3 years. And we set out these two kind of main aims from the outset, which were to identify consumer insights on the most pressing barriers to best practice management and ask for their suggested solutions to make meaningful change in this space. And we also wanted to develop an educational intervention as part of this fellowship as well. So we wanted to ask our consumers, what do they think the key myths out there that create the barriers to best practice management? And this fellowship was, I was mentored by Tash Stanton all the way through, and also Dr. John Arnold, who's pictured here as well. And we also had a bit of a broader aim associated with this research as well, which was to share detailed, replicable and adaptable accounts of our consumer involvement methods to hopefully promote more and better consumer involvement in osteoarthritis research, to really address that gap in the literature that we see at the moment where consumers don't seem to be involved in the research, at least not to a really deep level of involvement. It's kind of more of a tick box exercise. You might see a sentence here or there in a paper where they've said, oh, patients were involved in this part of the research, but we wanted to make sure that we were reporting everything we did so that other people could adapt it for their own purposes. So we used a co-design method, especially for our initial workshops, where we really wanted to answer those first two aims that I mentioned, which is essentially doing research with consumers rather than about them. And this technique is really helpful for really facilitating that genuine consumer involvement to really create some meaningful solutions and bridge the gap that we do see between research and practice in osteoarthritis at the moment. So we used a co-design workshop. It was a participatory workshop sort of design. And we used a non-hierarchical participatory framework, which essentially what we wanted to do was work with our consumers at the equal partnership level. And we used this integrated conceptual framework to plan our workshops. So basically, this was developed by our wonderful collaborators at the University of South Australia, Dr. Aaron Davis and Professor Ian Gwilt, pictured here. They're actually from UniSA Creative. Aaron's actually an architect. So they don't have a health background, but they are design thinking experts, and they use co-design in everything that they do. So they work with clients to design, co-design solutions for all the problems that they face in their field. And so we brought them in to really help us ask the right questions of our consumers and co-researchers, and help us really plan these co-design workshops in a way that really got to some really help open up their thinking and really got them to open up and share their true beliefs and things like that. It was really about asking the right questions, and I'll take you through some of those a bit later on. But basically, this framework has two axes. One of them is control over outcomes or decision making. So this is where we look at how much power each person on the team has over the decisions that we make. So we wanted that to be equal between the research team and the co-researchers. So we worked at the collaborate level there. And then on the other axis, the value from processes. So this is about the quality of the participatory activities that we were implementing, and we wanted to work at the partnership level there. So we wanted to make sure we were using activities that really brought out the ability for our co-researchers to contribute in a meaningful way. One of the ways we really tried to highlight their equal and important role on the research team was by framing their role as co-researchers rather than subjects or participants. And we really wanted them to understand that they were part of the research team from research conception all the way through to when we were putting things out there into the world. So we have actually published these initial workshops last year, and all 6 of the co-researchers involved are co-authors on this paper. So I just wanted to start by introducing you to the co-researcher team. We had 6 people, all of them had knee osteoarthritis, had a nice range in age there and symptom duration as well, but they were all highly educated, so they all had university level degrees. And they were all doing quite well, so they were all engaging with best practice self-management strategies. One of our co-researchers had actually recently completed one of our clinical trials, which involved a pain science education and graded walking program, and none of them had had a knee replacement either. And so this is obviously a bit of a limitation. I wanted to pull out those particular things about the sample here just because they're all high SES, they're all doing quite well, and that's not actually the kind of people we want to target with the research that we're doing. So there is some limitations around this, but these are just the kind of people that put their hands up for this sort of consumer advisory panel role that being involved in the research program for up to 3 years, quite in-depth workshops requiring a lot of introspection and altruism to contribute meaningfully. We did try to recruit other people from different backgrounds, but we just didn't have much luck. So we started to reflect on that and think about other ways we could include diverse opinions into what we're doing, and I'll talk about how we did that a bit later on. We also had a stakeholder advisory panel. They weren't involved directly in the workshops that we conducted because we wanted the consumer voice to be at the forefront of what we were doing, but they helped review what we'd done, our processes and outcomes, and advise us on going forward after our co-design workshops. So this was mostly clinicians. We had a physio, a general practitioner, 2 orthopaedic surgeons, a rheumatologist, and we also had a science communication expert as well, given that one of the plans we had was to develop an educational intervention. Okay, so I'll talk you through some of the methods that we used in our workshops. I just think this was really informed by our design thinking experts, Aaron and Ian, and some of the techniques that we used in these workshops were really interesting, and I think they could have some relevance to clinical practice as well, because they're really kind of different ways of asking questions to get at potential solutions for people living with osteoarthritis and pain. So before they came into the workshops, we got them to complete a couple of preparation activities. Then when they came into the workshops, we did some introductory activities as well to kind of break the ice. And then to answer each aim, we had a bunch of prompt questions and activities as well. So the preparation activities, these were developed by our Ph.D. student, Brian Pulling, who's pictured down here. He's about to defend his thesis next week, so wish him luck. But yeah, basically he developed 2 new assessment techniques for osteoarthritis, one assessing explicit beliefs about osteoarthritis and the other looking at implicit unconscious beliefs. So we got our co-researchers to complete these. The first was the osteoarthritis conceptualisation scale. So this was a list of statements like exercise wears out my knee joint, and they were just asked to rate how strongly they agreed or disagreed with those statements. And the implicit association task. So this was designed to look at some more unconscious beliefs. So you might have heard of these sorts of tasks before. They've been used to measure things like racial bias. So Brian developed a version of this test to look at the unconscious associations between danger and safety of knee movement. So it's basically a reaction time task, and you just look at the associations based on the reaction time of categorising the images into danger or safe categories. So yeah, we got our co-researchers to complete those and to try and just familiarise them with the topics that we'd be discussing before they came in for the workshops. Then when they actually came in, we started off with our introductions. So the research team all introduced themselves first. We shared why we're passionate about osteoarthritis research, and we also shared any personal connections that we had to osteoarthritis. So for example, I talked about how my dad had recently had a hip replacement, actually didn't go so well. I talked about that story to really show them some vulnerability and create that safe space for them to share their own stories and beliefs as well. So then we asked our co-researchers to share their stories as well if they felt comfortable, and also their motivations for being part of the research. Then we moved on to really emphasise their important and equal role on the co-design team as co-researchers. And we set some expectations around engagement as well. So things like, obviously being respectful and polite through the discussions, but also giving permission to disagree. We really want to hear everyone's opinions, even if you feel they're different to the others. We told them how everything we discuss is confidential during the workshops. If there's anything you didn't want shared beyond the workshop, we make sure that was kept confidential as well. And we also gave them all a workbook because we wanted to give an opportunity to provide contributions that were more anonymous as well. So if they were too nervous or worried about sharing something verbally during the workshops in front of other people, they had a way to still share their thoughts without announcing it in front of the group. All right, so this takes us to the actual prompt questions and activities that we used during the workshop to answer each of the 2 aims that I mentioned at the start. So the first aim was just to remind you what are the most pressing barriers to best practice management and any suggested solutions as well. So we used lots of different techniques in these 8 prompt questions, and I'll just talk you through the specific techniques that we used. And these were intended to really get at the why, really get towards those sort of deeply held beliefs that people might have and encourage some really creative thinking as well. So one of the strategies we used was called prioritisation. So for example, asking what are the top 5 most important things, what's the biggest challenge you've experienced, or if you could just change one thing that matters to your OA experience, what would it be? And this was to get our co-researchers to try and focus on the really key, most pressing issues that they've faced or that they feel that's out there in the community, rather than just listing every single thing that they could think of or every negative experience they had. What we really wanted to get at what's the most kind of important from their perspective. We also asked what would be the worst solution for people with OA. So asking people what's the best solution for people with OA is actually a really difficult question to answer, and probably none of us could answer it. So we used negative framing and just flipped it to ask what is the worst solution. This really draws on people's lived experience because negative aspects of care are often remembered quite well, more so than positive aspects potentially, and they can still be translated into potential solutions, and we can at least know what not to do going forward. We also used imaginative journeys. So we got our co-researchers to imagine you had unlimited financial resources. You're a rich celebrity. How would you manage your OA then? And this was really to promote some creative thinking by taking away a really common barrier that we all know exists, which is money and access to healthcare. And this was great. We got some really interesting answers to this question. So for example, one lady talked about that she would hire an OA coach. So someone that she had 24-hour access to, had really good OA and pain knowledge, that she could ask questions at any time as soon as they popped into her head, but also keep her going on an exercise program as well. So if she had a setback or a flare-up, that person was there to reassure her and get her back on track, rather than having to wait weeks or months between appointments, as often is the case at the moment. And one of our last questions for this aim was, instead of asking what do you want, just changing that wording slightly to what do you want to achieve, to really try to uncover their suggested solutions to these potential barriers, rather than just an endpoint or an outcome. If we asked what do you want, they probably would have said, oh, I want less pain or something like that. We wanted to go deeper than that and uncover some more potential solutions of how to get there. So to answer aim 2, we had a few activities that we did and some more prompt questions associated with those as well. So just to remind you, aim 2 was about identifying the key OA myths that create barriers to best practice management. So, and to contextualise aim 2, we actually came to our co-researchers with a proposed project. I mentioned before we wanted to develop an educational intervention, and the plan was to deliver this via virtual reality to create like an experiential learning intervention involving pain science concepts. So we brought a virtual reality headset into the workshops, and we let our co-researchers try out the Pain Science Museum, which is pictured here. Just as an example, we'd create something more tailored to osteoarthritis was the plan, but this was developed by Dr. Dan Harvey. And I'll come back to that once we get to the results section for these workshops. So the first activity was perspective taking. So we got our co-researchers to imagine that they were someone else with osteoarthritis, to create a bit of abstraction and a detachment from their own personal situations, and really encourage some open thinking and sharing by minimising any sensitivities around sharing personal beliefs or being wrong and feeling silly about their beliefs. So we got them to imagine they were someone else, so it wasn't actually coming from them. And we purposely used a non-gender name, Sam. So we said, imagine you are Sam. You've been told you have severe OA and you need surgery. You're extremely fearful of exercising because you believe that it will make your OA worse. And despite your concerns, your physio prescribes you an exercise program. And then we had some prompt questions. So how do you, as Sam, feel about this? What do you think and why? And what would convince you to engage with exercise in this situation? Then the next activity was a counter-stereotypical exemplar. So we had a video of a real person telling their osteoarthritis story. So this person had really quite disabling osteoarthritis. She was a yoga teacher and she had to stop teaching because of her pain. But then she started engaging with an exercise and education program, and she substantially improved to the point where she got back to teaching, and at the very end of the video shows her doing this humongous box jump, which would send shivers down the spine of most people with knee osteoarthritis. So we purposely kept that bit in. And then we asked these questions. Does this story seem plausible? Do you think this is a real person, or do you think we hired an actor? And if you think this is an actor, why do you think that? What surprised you, and which key messages from this story are important for people with OA to hear? We then got them to reflect on the preparation tasks that they completed before the workshop. So we gave them all their individual results back, confidentially, and we also gave them an analysis of some group level data of people in the community. So we had 50 people in the community complete the 2 tasks as well. And we asked some prompt questions around this as well. So do any of these questions or results stand out to you? We pulled out 2 of the items from the osteoarthritis conceptualisation scale that relate to some really common myths that are out there. So what if I told you that wear and tear and bone on bone are not true? And we discussed a particularly interesting result in the group level data as well. So what we saw in this group level data was that people tended to agree that OA is a wear and tear disease, but they still also believe that exercise was good for their OA, which seems like a contradiction. So we asked them, what can we do to address this conflict in people? And then we asked some final prompt questions at the very end of the workshop to really get at the heart of AIM 2. So we started off by saying, reflect on what you believe to be most important for the broader OA community. What do you think are the most unhelpful beliefs or myths out there? What do you think are the main things that stop people with OA from exercising? And we used the negative framing again as well. What would be the worst way to convince you that movement was important for your OA? All right, so we had quite a lot of findings from these workshops, given that we asked so many questions and did so many activities with the co-researchers. But what came out really strongly from all of the workshops we conducted was that the co-researchers felt that knowledge and understanding about OA requires improvement at the societal level. So not just people with osteoarthritis or consumers, but also their support networks, their friends, family and carers who are often involved in decision making around management as well. Health professionals too, and the media and information sources as well. So the co-researchers also talked a lot about how there's just so much information out there, and a lot of it's contradictory, and it's really hard to figure out what's credible and what advice to actually follow. So in terms of a potential solution to this problem, this is what they suggested, and they talked about this idea of mainstreaming OA. So they wanted to do a community-wide messaging intervention to improve societal understanding and reduce the negative impacts of common myths. So this brings us back to the virtual reality idea. Frankly, our co-researchers hated it. Most of them didn't even want to try on the headset. I think only one person ended up actually giving it a go. And they talked about things like, well, if we're learning complex concepts that's challenging our beliefs, and then we also have to learn a technology, it's going to make it harder to learn these new ideas. But more importantly, it really conflicted with what they were telling us, that the problem was actually at the societal level. So at the moment, virtual reality is very much an individual level, one-on-one kind of intervention, and it's also not very accessible at the moment. You pretty much have to go to a clinic if you want to do a clinical intervention involving virtual reality. So yeah, they really didn't like this idea, and that was quite challenging to hear. We had already set the wheels in motion, like we had ethics approval and everything. So we were like, okay, what should we do about this? So we talked to our stakeholder advisory panel, and they were like, well, if that's what they think, then I think we need to change the research direction, and we agreed with that. So my entire fellowship changed because of this co-researcher input. But that was awesome though. It was, at first it was really challenging for me to make those changes and really kind of start from scratch again, but it's led to a project that I'm much more excited and passionate about. So yeah, I think it just really highlights the value of the consumer involvement. I just wanted to share a few insights that I thought were quite novel, things that I hadn't really thought about before that they told us. So they talked about how the timing of an OA diagnosis often aligns with retirement, and this can compound related issues around social identity, value, self-worth, and ageism that they're already experiencing as part of retirement and things like that. And they also talked about how these sorts of psychological impacts around a new OA diagnosis are typically ignored. It's all about the structural, physical side of it. No one talks about the psychological side of it. And they also talked about how a diagnosis for other health conditions like heart disease and cancer come with a really well-defined and holistic care pathway, which just does not exist in osteoarthritis. All of our co-researchers said their experience was they were diagnosed and told to come back when it was really bad, and they'll be referred for surgery, and that was it. In terms of AIM 2, we identified 7 key myths. These are in no particular order, but they were, my OA is only going to get worse and there's no hope. I need to stop using my joint, rest is best. Surgery is the only solution. I can't lose weight. Exercise makes OA worse, the classic wear and tear. I've got no cartilage left and I'm bone on bone, and I have OA because I'm old. It should be an expected part of getting older, and the ageism around that. So as I mentioned before, we also had this broader aim of really publishing our methods in detail so they can be replicated and adapted to other research studies and clinical practice as well. So this is just an excerpt of one of the tables we included in the paper, listing every single activity and every single question that we actually asked during the workshops, and also the rationale behind each of these activities as well, so they can be adapted to other projects to hopefully empower other researchers to use these sorts of methods in their research as well. We also wanted to provide some evidence that we were working at the level that we set out to work at with our co-researchers. So back to this integrated conceptual framework here, we thought evidence that we were working at the partnership level was that all co-researchers contributed to a high degree during the workshops and all the way through to publication. They felt safe to share their stories, they identified and proposed novel solutions, and they felt empowered to really challenge a project that we proposed to them and say, no, we don't want that. We're doing something else. And yeah, evidence that we worked at the collaboration level, so this is the axis around decision making. This led to a complete change in my fellowship, so I think we achieved that level quite well as well. And these 6 co-researchers are all part of a continuing research collaboration as well, so we're still all working together a couple of years later now to work towards this suggested solution. So what are we up to now? Well, so we've parked the virtual reality for now, and now we're working on creating a community-wide messaging intervention or a media campaign. So we first wanted to look at what's already been done out there. So right now I'm writing up a systematic review of contemporary media campaigns for pain. with my wonderful collaborators, Rochelle Bookbinder, Doug Gross and Samir Deshpande. So Rochelle and Doug have led implementation of 2 massive media campaigns for low back pain. It's called Back Pain, Don't Take It Lying Down. You might have seen papers about that before. So it's great to have their expertise for this review. So our key findings were where we found 8 campaigns, all implemented in 8 different Western developed countries. So unfortunately nothing in developing countries. But it was interesting. We had campaigns all over the world in 8 different countries, which was good to compare. Overall, they were effective at reducing societal misconceptions about pain, particularly back pain. But whether this translates into actually changing pain-related behaviours and clinical outcomes still remains unclear. The outcomes that they used are often not related to the campaign messages and things like that. There's lots of problems in this literature. So there's a bit of work to be done there. But what I found really interesting was that very few campaigns were co-designed with target audiences or consumers. And the ones that did claim to do this, it was literally like a sentence, and they didn't report any details of how they did it or the quality of those processes. So it's really hard to know how much they were actually involved in that development. And we found no previous media campaigns for osteoarthritis. So there obviously have been campaigns for osteoarthritis in the past, but they haven't been properly evaluated. So we were only including peer-reviewed published evaluations in this review. That's a good gap for me to fill, hopefully. So now we are, with our co-researcher team, co-designing and testing myth-busting resources to educate the public about OA. And with this new idea, we decided actually we shouldn't be limiting to knee OA. The stuff we're creating is relevant to all types of lower limb OA. So we recruited a few more co-researchers. 10 out of 11 still have knee OA, but 4 of them also have hip OA, and 2 of them have foot and ankle OA. We have a bit more of a range in age. We have someone a bit younger, which is great to have her perspective. She's 44. And 3 of them have also had joint replacement surgery, so it's so great to have their perspectives involved as we move forward as well. So we've been using an iterative co-design process to develop our resources, using the exact same framework and participatory strategies that we used for the initial workshops. And we decided to create some videos first up because videos are just really, really engaging. They're more likely to be shared on social media than images and articles. And they can easily be adapted to other forms of media as well. So once we pull out what the key messages or the most potent messages actually are, we can create images, infographics, and audio from that. So basically what we did was the research team drafted a transcript for each video based on contemporary pain science. And then we held a meeting with our co-researchers to get feedback on the transcript. We implemented that feedback and then sent the transcript to an animator who created a draft animation. And then we took that draft animation back to the co-researchers and asked them for more feedback. Often when people see things visually, all new sorts of things come up, so we wanted to give them another opportunity to comment. Then we took that back to the animator and he created a final video prototype that we used to test the messages using online survey methods. So this is where we really tried to address the limitation of our co-researcher team, which is still quite biased in terms of socio-economic status and things like that. We used online survey methods where we purposely sampled people from different socio-demographic backgrounds to really try to provide an opportunity for these sorts of different opinions to come in a less burdensome way for people who might not be able to contribute in those in-depth workshops. We tried to really capture those opinions in a way that was more inclusive and flexible. In our initial workshops as well, we asked our co-researchers for what kind of messaging strategies we should be using in an educational intervention. And these were the things they said. So they really like the myth-busting theme, so all of the videos have that in them. They said it's important to include scientific facts, evidence and data, use plain English, of course, patient-friendly language, but also include scientific terms with a clear definition for credibility. They also talked a lot about the power of storytelling and testimonials of real people. So hearing people's success stories with best practice management was something that they thought was really important and can be really powerful to help people overcome misconceptions and see that it can actually work for someone just like them. Anecdotes and metaphors we use a lot, catchphrases. Each video has a little catchphrase. They wanted us to include anatomical diagrams because understanding the anatomy and the physiology is important to people with osteoarthritis. Practical advice, especially around exercise and things like that. A call to action at the end, so saying things like, here's where to start, and linking people to resources. University and funder branding for credibility, and they really wanted each video to provide new hope. So we really tried to make sure each video was had a hopeful kind of message. So the first video we created is called The Cartilage Story. This video targeted a bunch of the different myths we identified, but really focused on the exercise makes OA worse, the wear and tear myth. So I'll show you a quick clip from this video. It's just a 30-second clip, but the actual video is 3 minutes. So if you're interested in any of the videos that I show you now, please get in touch. I'd be happy to share them. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
What you might not realise is that cartilage doesn't actually stay the same. It can get better. Let's investigate. Did you know that when astronauts go into space, their cartilage gets thinner? Wait a minute. So when there's no gravity, no load on their knee, so no possibility of wear and tear, the cartilage gets thinner and less healthy. And did you know that runners often have healthier cartilage than non-runners? Wait a minute. So when there is lots of load on their knee, the ultimate wear and tear situation, their cartilage gets healthier? What's going on?
We really tried to bust this myth by using some scientific facts that directly kind of show that movement and load is actually required to keep cartilage healthy. The astronaut example, the running example, and just anecdotally as well, I mean, we're doing a big clinical trial at the moment involving a pain science education intervention with a handbook that we created. And we've got these little scientific facts in that book about the astronauts and the runners, and that's something that participants often reported back as like a real light bulb moment for them. Cartilage, keeping moving and putting load through the cartilage. I've never heard that before. That's actually going to keep my cartilage more healthy. So it kind of unlocked something for them and allowed them to engage with the exercise program. So yeah, it was great feedback. We've got good evidence that exercise works for OA. So they're the kind of facts we wanted to incorporate into this video. And our catchphrase for this one was deliberately provocative, wear and repair. Really contrasting that wear and tear myth. So we've tested this video in an online survey, as I mentioned before, where we used really purposive maximal variation sampling to really get those diverse perspectives involved in the process. Participants completed outcomes before and after watching the video. Our primary outcome was osteoarthritis beliefs, so we used items from that questionnaire that I showed you before that our Ph.D. candidate Brian Pulling created. We also had some secondary outcomes around self-efficacy, fear of movement and management intentions. And then after the video, we also had a series of open questions for people to be able to provide feedback. And we split the sample into 3 target audience groups, so people with OA, people without OA, and health professionals. And so this paper is currently under review. We saw some pretty nice results. So in our primary outcome OA beliefs, we saw improvements in all 3 groups, which was great, and these effects were large, medium to large. I thought it was particularly surprising to see such an effect in the health professional group, so that was really exciting. In the people with OA as well, we saw small improvements in fear of movement and exercise intentions, but no change in pain, self-efficacy or surgery intention. However, interestingly, with the surgery intention outcome, we saw a quarter of a sample were less likely to see a surgeon in the next 12 months. So even though that wasn't statistically significant, we still think that potentially has clinical meaning given the huge individual and societal level impact that surgery has. Even if one person is less likely to have surgery, that's still quite a meaningful result. And it was quite surprising as well, because surgery was only mentioned once in this video. So people were kind of taking something from the messages and inferring that, oh, maybe I'll try something else first, which is great. Half of the sample said they would manage their OA differently after the video, and 3/4 said that the video information differed to what they'd been previously told by health professionals. So that was really cool to see that we still saw such a shift in OA beliefs, given that we were really directly, obviously, challenging any pre-existing beliefs that they'd been told by health professionals. And the feedback was really positive, and I think this was a real testament to our co-researcher team. The feedback that came out most strongly was that the video was so easy to understand and clear and used patient-friendly language. 91% said they would recommend the video to someone with OA. And the most common suggestion was the need to provide more information on practicalities and guidance around how to start, which led really nicely into our next video called The Sweet Zone. So this video targets pretty much the same myths as the cartilage story, but it's more about the principles of engaging with a graded activity program in a safe and effective way. It uses the metaphor of an odometer, so it talks about finding your own personal sweet zone, not doing too little, but also not doing too much. So this was split into 2 parts. Part 1 was talking about the principles of the sweet zone and the odometer example, and part 2 was the practicalities, so how to actually find and thrive in your sweet zone. So I'll show you a quick clip of this one as well.
Your sweet zone is the amount of physical activity that is just right for you and your joint at this moment. Not too little and not too much. Your sweet zone is completely unique to you and is under your control. In the too little zone, you are not doing enough activity that makes you breathe a bit harder than normal. You don't have a big enough nudge. Your activity level is too low to maintain the health of your body and your joint. Your health can even go backwards. It's like when you've been unwell and in bed for a few days. It's much harder to walk around and move than it was before being sick, isn't it? We don't want to stay in the too little zone. In the too much zone, you are doing activity faster, harder, or longer than your body is ready for. Your activity level is too high and you may experience some more discomfort, pain, or swelling than normal. Your nudge is too much. But this does not mean you have damaged your joint. This is just our body's way of telling us we've overdone it. It's like if you tried to walk up a really steep hill or even run 5 kilometers without training. Your body is going to hurt. You need to slowly work up to higher activity levels. Have you tried to increase your activity level and found that it didn't work for you? It just made your joint hurt more? This is very common. Take a moment to reflect. Maybe you were in the too much zone. The key is to slowly but surely increase your activity levels over time, to nudge your body so that you can do more activity with less pain. When increasing activity, you may get a slight increase in pain as your body adapts. But if you are in the sweet zone, this pain will go away quickly afterwards.
Cool. And then in part 2, it was about the principles of actually engaging with the program, and the steps. So we had 4 steps: 1, find your sweet zone; 2, build your sweet zone; 3, reach your goal; and 4, maintain the change. And we used a worked example of someone going through an actual walking program. So we used the exactly the same design to assess this video using an online survey method, and we literally analysed this data like 3 days ago, so you're the first to see it. I've only done the primary outcome so far though, but we saw similar effects. So all 3 groups had significant improvements in OA beliefs, and these effects were medium to large as well, which is great. So our next video, we wanted to start looking at this myth around losing weight and weight management. But upon conversations with our co-researchers, we wanted to kind of take it from a different angle around maybe weight loss shouldn't be the only goal, and maybe we should be thinking more about healthy eating and diet as a way to manage this body-wide systemic inflammation. So the principles of this video were around healthy eating as a way to reduce this body-wide inflammation, and that weight loss shouldn't be the only goal, and you haven't failed if you haven't lost weight, because we know now that osteoarthritis, it's not all about the load through the joint, it's not a wear and tear disease. So we use some of the scientific facts to kind of bust myths around that as well in this video. And our catchphrase for this one was "Nourish to Flourish." All of these catchphrases were developed by our co-researcher team, which was really cool. So I'll show you a quick clip of this one as well.
Healthy eating can also help shrink fat cells by losing weight, especially those pesky fat cells around the waist, which produce the most body-wide inflammation. But it is important not to only focus on the numbers on the scale. There are many different factors that can influence our weight, including factors that are completely outside of our control, like genetics, medical conditions, and medications. This means that weight loss should not be the only goal, and you have not failed if you don't lose weight. Instead, try to find ways that you can reduce inflammation, including healthy eating.
Yeah, and that section about the other factors that contribute to not being able to lose weight was included because of our co-researchers. They felt that that was really an important message, so it was great to be able to include that in there. So the myth-busting facts that we used in this video, the video itself is about 3 minutes as well. We talked about how there's OA in non-load-bearing joints like your hand. You don't walk on your hands, so it's not all about load through your joints. People with smaller bodies can also have osteoarthritis, and all this emerging evidence that we're seeing around the systemic inflammation contributing to osteoarthritis, the links to the gut microbiome and healthy eating, the ability of healthy eating to reduce systemic inflammation and OA pain, especially when paired with exercise interventions. We also wanted to create a video that capitalised on the power of storytelling, as our co-researchers talked about a lot. So we found this wonderful man called Ian. He goes by Mr. Cookfulness. He has osteoarthritis, among other disabilities, including fibromyalgia as well. And a few years ago, he was in a really dark place. He was basically housebound. He had to retire from his job. And the way he kind of overcame this is through cooking with healthy ingredients. So he really used a value-based goals to get over his osteoarthritis and pain and everything. And he actually wrote this cookbook as well called Cookfulness. So we wanted to capture his story in a video and see how that compared to the more informational animation type of videos as well. So I've got a clip of a draft video. We've only just started making these videos with him, but here's a little clip of the kind of thing we're going to create.
Well, actually, cooking is a way that I think I could be more visible and more present, because I used to cook, but now it's taken on a whole thing, which is actually cooking could be one of the ways I can be more present and more visible and more active. It will help me to eat more healthily and cook more healthily. My mental and physical health should all tie together and go up. Seemed like the perfect thing to do. It was an absolute disaster, but hey, these things are. I couldn't reach things, it was inaccessible, things were too heavy, too sharp, too pointy, you name it, and it was very, very difficult. And it was that point of, oh no, this jigsaw's piled up again. But I thought, no, hang on, how can I turn these corners? How can I get some lines around the outside of this jigsaw? What framework can I build that's going to mean that actually I can cook differently? Why do I have to follow the rules everyone else has? Why can I not cook the way that works for me? So I started creating my own rules of the kitchen, of cooking, that work, that allow me to get through and cook dishes that previously I couldn't have done before.
So yeah, he's created this video where he initially shares his story, and he's also created a series of videos where he's doing actual cooking demonstrations as well, using anti-inflammatory ingredients. So we haven't done this yet, but the plan is to test these videos, again using an online survey format in a very similar way to the previous ones, but we want to compare the two types of videos. So they've got similar information in them, but it's a very different kind of communication strategy that they use. So we wanted to look at, again, the primary outcome around beliefs, but also other outcomes that are really important for a media campaign, which is do the videos make people actually want to do something different? So we'll probably look at things like engagement with linked resources. So we'll have a QR code or something at the end of each video and just see how much people engage with those resources after viewing each video and compare them in that way. We also want to address the surgery is the only solution myth. So we will use the power of storytelling for this one as well. We've got a lovely co-researcher here called Peter, and he has an amazing story. So he was told back in 2017 that he has very severe knee osteoarthritis in both knees and he needed bilateral knee replacements immediately. But he decided to instead try one of our clinical trials. So that was involving a pain science education and 12-month walking program. And within a year of completing that trial, he achieved his aspirational goal, which was walking the Camino Trail. So that was 320 Ks in 14 days. It's an amazing achievement, and we think that's a really powerful story to share. So we're going to capture that. We're actually going to publish that as a case study as well. So look out for that one. We'll also incorporate some important scientific facts in this video as well. There's some really great data in Australia from the GLAD program showing that education, exercise and weight management can prevent surgery. So this was in 75% of people in a clinical audit of GLAD participants, over 2,000 participants. And these were all people who had initial desires and plans to have surgery. So that's a pretty amazing result. And we think these sorts of facts as well just aren't very well known. Surgery is kind of seen as this silver bullet cure for osteoarthritis still, but actually up to 44% of people have persistent post-surgical pain, and in 15% of these people the pain is moderate to severe. And up to around half of people are actually dissatisfied with their surgical outcome 6 months later. So we think that's actually really important for people to know, so they can make informed decisions and hopefully become more aware of other options. In terms of the last couple of myths that we want to bust, we will do some stuff around the bone-on-bone myth and this myth around the OA being an expected part of ageing. So we'll create a resource around the interpretation of imaging findings and what to expect as normal for your age group. So we're working on an infographic for that at the moment. We might make a video for that as well. We want to create some stuff around what to do when you're first diagnosed, including the psychological support that our co-researchers mentioned wasn't addressed at the moment. And really include some positive messaging around ageing and retirement and providing new hope. So just to finish off, I have learned so much over the last couple of years in working with consumers in our research. It's really opened my eyes to what can actually create meaningful change for these people, and just, the value of collaborating with them as partners rather than subjects or co-researchers, as we like to frame it. And this partnership has led to some really great outcomes so far. So really identifying some new novel strategies to create meaningful change for people with OA, and creation of some resources that look to be potentially impactful and really easy to understand, palatable, considering we're challenging people's beliefs, with potential to improve public understanding about osteoarthritis. I just wanted to highlight this quote from one of our co-researchers as well. I think it just really highlights the mutually beneficial nature of co-design research. All of our co-researchers just love being involved, especially all the way through to publication. They've just, they've been so positive about the whole process. And this is one of the quotes from one of them. It's a special feeling to have done so much detailed, innovative work and to arrive at this point of putting it out there. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of your research. So I just want to thank everyone who has made this research possible, the Persistent Pain Research Group, the funder Hospital Research Foundation. The animator is Josh Hobbs, Mr. Cookfulness. We have some consumers over in the UK as well who have been really helpful in providing feedback, our stakeholder advisory panel, and of course, all my wonderful collaborators and co-researchers. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're gonna, run over a little bit, but
sorry.
I think, no, you were fantastic. We started a little late, so just let me know, if you need to go, I'm gonna make 2 quick announcements, and then we'll just do questions as long as you're willing to stay. Okay, so don't forget, if you're interested in buying the videos, they're only gonna be available for purchase for $75 until March 10th. After that, you will not be able to get them. And then also tonight there is an event, Disrupt OT and PT After Dark are holding a joint discussion session from 5 to 6 on relevant cultural, health, and social considerations of making our clinical work more accessible and inclusive. So again, it starts at 5 o'clock, and everyone is welcome. You did not need to pre-register or anything for that. I saw a hand that I have not seen over here. Okay. Oh, where is it at? It's here. It's here. Also, we start at 8:30 tomorrow, so my hot tub friends, you'll have 8.5 hours to kill after the hot tub closes.
Felicity, is fascinating work. Regarding your the first video you showed, you did not have a meaningful change with pain self-efficacy. Considering the importance of that, wondering maybe what your thoughts are on why you didn't see a significant change and whether that might change future videos on what you do.
Yeah, great question. We actually added that questionnaire in halfway through data collection. So that was an oversight by us, but we realised once we'd already started collecting data, so we had half of the sample about complete that questionnaire, so we might have been underpowered there. But yeah, even so, the actual effects was small. So yeah, I think that's where I would see the power of storytelling and hearing real person testimonials might be more powerful. So that's why I'm really interested in doing our next study with a head-to-head comparison of the animation information myth-busting approach versus actually hearing a relatable true story, and whether that actually leads to more self-efficacy and belief that actually maybe I can do this too despite my pain. Yeah, so that's what, yeah, stay tuned for that result.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. It reminds me of the AIDS activists, pushing to be involved in the research, having some agency and say in the work that that would impact them, to be participants rather than simply subjects. So that was wonderful. Thank you. Second point, question really was, I'm curious what impact this had on the co-researchers in terms of their clinical outcomes, their lived experience, their function, and so on. And then this is a very trivial thing perhaps, but the animation with the astronaut sitting on the moon, I only comment on this because I'm aware that there's this very fringe conspiracy movement out there that says the moon doesn't exist, that the earth is flat, we've never been in the moon, stuff like that. Just perhaps changing that one little thing.
Yeah, interesting point. I mean, we surveyed over 100, it was around 150 people in the survey, and no one mentioned the moon. So I don't know. I'll let you know if we ever get that feedback.
Some people think Australia doesn't exist.
Yeah, I've heard that one. I heard that one last night. In terms of the co-researchers' involvement in the process, we haven't actually measured anything with them. As I mentioned, though, when they came into the program, they were all doing really well. They were all engaging with exercise programs. None of them had had a knee replacement or even considering it. I think one of them had had a couple of arthroscopies, but that was the extent of it. And yeah, but in terms of the anecdotal feedback we've gotten from them, they've just loved being part of the process. They all are very altruistic people, and they just really feel like they're giving back to the osteoarthritis community. And I think they've actually learned a lot as well. So when we actually got them to complete those questionnaires at the beginning and we talked through kind of some of the myths, I think that changed their minds a bit, and they think about things a bit differently now as well, which is great to see.
I'm curious about the plans as far as releasing these, hopefully online, where many people could find them, share them, be exposed to them.
Yeah, we've been talking about that a bit recently. I'm coming to the end of this fellowship now, so we're trying to get the research funded to take it to that next level of the media campaign. So we're keeping the videos in-house at the moment. We're still just collecting pilot data. We still consider them drafts as well. But eventually we will release them. We're not going to keep them to ourselves forever. If you're interested in having a personal copy, I'd be happy to chat about that. But yeah, at the moment we're still kind of keeping them under wraps so we can test them properly, get the messages right, and before we release them into the world. Like, for example, in the cartilage story, we're going to change the catchphrase wear and repair, because there isn't actually a huge amount of scientific evidence supporting that statement, and we don't want to be misleading. So yeah, that video will need to be updated before it gets widely disseminated. So those sorts of things, and when we get look at the feedback from the other videos, when we analyse all that data, we're going to need to make sure that the videos are nailing the messaging and not offending it or upsetting people. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm Baram Jam. And there's only one more myth that I would like you to add to it. The part that you said weight loss is not the only goal. I would say weight loss should not be the goal at all. Because I pride myself that in my 32 years, I've never told a single patient you need to lose weight. I think it's the most awful thing any healthcare professional that say. I believe the focus should be on physical activity, eating well, because the studies show even with zero weight loss, you can get better. So the myth that I must lose weight in order to be pain-free adds unnecessary stress, and the stress adds more guilt and shame, which we know affects microbiome, stress, inflammation, immune system reduction, and prevention of getting better from nervous system sensitivity. So I think that myth should be busted that you don't need to lose weight at all. If it happens because you became physically active exercise, bonus, fine, but it's unnecessary.
I love this, and our original draft did actually say that, but we ended up changing it a bit because of our collaborators who feel that weight loss is still an important part of management. So yeah, but I do really love that, and I think let's chat about how we can incorporate this into the video.
Felicity, thanks so much for your presentation. I love this room. Great statement there as well. I want to pretend like we're not in America and ask you a very specifically Australian question. Indigenous Australians face a 20 to 50% greater susceptibility to developing osteoarthritis. Have you done any cultural safety, cultural acceptability work on any of these concepts? Is it in the works? Yeah.
No, not really. We had one target around, we had a couple of targets around cultural background in the surveys that we conducted, and one of them was around including Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. But yeah, that's clearly not enough. But in all the grants I've been submitting to try and get this research funded, we will do specific focus groups that look at culturally and linguistically diverse groups. So that's the plan in the future. I'm just very constrained by funds at the moment. So I can only really do the bare minimum, and it's really expensive to do animations. So yeah, just doing what I can to get some pilot data together so we can get this work funded and make sure that we incorporate those factors. Yeah.
For those of us who are dealing with practitioners in our community who are communicating nocebos and iatrogenic narratives, how can we use information like this and resources to combat that so that way, most of the PTs and orthos in my region, as well-intentioned as they are telling people outright false things that are quite literally scaring them from doing the things necessary to help. And then they come to me, little exercise physiologists, is like, how do you know more than the doctor? And sometimes the only answer I have is, I'm up to date on the research. And that makes it sound like the doctor's not doing their job, which is not what we want to communicate to the patients. We don't want to disparage our allied healthcare professionals. So do we have any ideas or strategies on how to deal with this on both the individual level within our clinics, but also within our communities, and perhaps begin reaching out to those providers and bringing them into the fold and helping them get up to date? Yeah,
I think that question really kind of speaks to my motivations behind this consumer-led media campaign. health professional beliefs are really difficult to shift. And there's going to, I think targeting them specifically is going to be really difficult. So what I'm really trying to focus on is creating kind of more of a bottom-up, consumer-led grassroots movement so that the information comes from the consumer and they go to their health professional with this information and can hopefully ask better questions about what other kind of treatments are available and maybe be a bit immune to these nocibic sort of statements that they're probably going to get faced with. So that's the way I'm kind of trying to approach it with my research. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, cool.
All right, I just counted to 10 in my head. No other questions right now. Did I miss anyone online? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so that'll be the end of today. Thank you again so much for staying late for more questions. It's currently pouring outside, just to warn you. It rains like 4 days a year in San Diego, so enjoy.